My name is Charlotte, and I graduated last summer from Mount Allison with a triple minor in biology, religious studies, and geography. But I've always had an interest in language and theatre. I missed out on Tintamarre in my first year, saw a bunch of friends who were part of the production, including a friend who played a gremlin type character, but she swore it was the most entertaining, rewarding part of her year. So the following year I joined in as a second year student, and I came back in my fourth year, and now I've had the chance to join in again just at the tail end of this process. So it's worked out well.
Wonderful. So when we're talking about the Tintamarre approach, I mean, Alex has this method. He hasn't actually, as far as I know, shared this method with anybody as it's been set up, except for his workshop. So as a participant in the kind of process, what do you see as the Tintamarre method? Pragmatically speaking, like what do we do when we're in this crazy space?
Well, I think one thing many people mention is the fact that there's no auditions. This is really a space for anyone who wants to be there. The fact that there's a bilingual component, I think, draws a crowd of people who might not show up for other theatre events, and also the fact that there's no audition, what attracts people who might be cautious about that in other settings. So that's one really neat part. And then once you've got people in a group sitting around together, we sit in a circle, and there's incredible listening that happens. It starts with Alex but is emulated by the group. And that first time we all meet together, we take the time to really listen as everyone introduces themselves. There's a lot of positive encouragement by way of superbe and génial and merci, from Alex. And then we run with it. We do games. We do games where you might feel like you're someone to step in and start, and also games where you can just stay back in the circle and watch other people, and you might do that for a few weeks. And most people then feel brave enough to take a turn stepping into the center and picking up a hula hoop and pretending it's actually an engagement ring and miming how that might work. Yeah.
Can you speak to your own experience of that? I mean, did you have any experience with theatre, and how did Tintamarre either really help or build on that, or how did you ease into that?
I did. I had quite a bit of experience doing theatre, both teaching drama camps to young children and also doing musical theatre productions at high school and some community theatre. And I found the process, the collaborative process, the conversations that we'd have, the throwing out of ideas, the imagining characters, that part was so rewarding because it was something I'd never had a chance to do before, always having worked with a set script. When we came to that first year, when we started with the script that Alex had created, I was a bit disappointed. It felt they're absurd plays, and I couldn't quite commit to it. And that's changed with the different subjects over the years that we've tackled as a Tintamarre community. And I think part of it had to do with me doubting, is this real theatre? And now I would say absolutely. But the first year was tough. It's hard to commit the hours that it takes to put on a production if you're not sure about what the result's going to be.
Right.
But in other years, I think that Tintamarre is an incredible theatre experience because it teaches life skills like listening, sharing an idea that you relinquish to a group instead of holding on to it and feeling like it's your own, and letting it change with the input of the group. I don't think we do that very often anywhere else, and it's very exciting to have a space to do that in. I think it's the best kind of theatre because we work hard Don't you think though, like what are the exercises that have stood out? Like has anyone talked about specific exercises?
If you want to talk about that, that's probably quite cool. What was the stuff that stood out for you? Not only necessarily as an actor, but as somebody who has a fair interest in education and in the education of youth.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see in those kinds of exercises?
I remember from the first year, what stood out as the most productive to me, what worked for me, was doing tableau together. And so Alex is really good at setting limits. And I think that creativity works well when there are limits that are set. So we had all of 3 minutes to work in groups of 6 or 7 people with many other students who were strangers to us. And we had to do the 7 deadly sins. And I think that's something we've done in many years. It was great. It was just great. We had 3 minutes. What do? You make a plan. You might have an idea and the rest of the group says, So you let go of it and you work with whatever they provide. And then you perform them. And there's an extended silence. Like we really hold on to this silence while the tableau was formed for at least a minute, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're standing there, it feels like a long time. And then slowly one person would comment and another person would comment, and each comment was listened to. And as an actor in a tableau, you'd learn things about what you'd created that you never would have thought of. So really a neat interaction between spectator and creator, back and forth. That stood out for me, for sure.
How comfortable were you in terms of French before you got to Tintamarre?
I was not very comfortable speaking it. I'd done immersion for 7 years and then advanced French classes for another 5. I had excellent reading comprehension, but any kind of colloquialism or how real people talk to each other outside of a text, I had no idea. And so it was really fun to play with those expressions, especially since it's a safe space when you have a text and you can read the words and other people in the group don't understand them either, and then you learn them together. Yeah.
Talking about safe spaces, in terms of language learning, what makes this a safe space? What makes it, well, fun?
What makes it a safe space for language learning?
Yeah.
Having a text, having it understood that you don't have to understand all the French from the beginning, knowing that you're not the only one who isn't understanding all the jokes. There's a lot of repetitive use of language, both in how Alex addresses the group and in the lines in the script. So you do come to these words over and over again. Lots of chances to practice. I found it helpful having a script where you could just read the lines. You don't have to be calling French into mind all the time. But because there are often Francophone students, and because Alex tries to speak in French to us when giving stage directions or announcements at the end of the day, it's remarkable how quickly you find yourself communicating off stage in little bursts of French, even if you're not totally sure it's the right grammar. Yeah, it sneaks up on you. Yeah, that's why I would think it's a safe space.
And in terms of theater, I mean, you've run those kinds of drama camps where you have a bunch of kids and you're not entirely sure where they come from. Is Tintamarre any different? What
we have the luxury of time in Tintamarre. We meet for 2 hours once a week for an entire fall. That's another reason I think the first year I did Tintamarre was not so, not such a fantastic experience for me, was because we ran the show. The show went up mid-November. So then we only had 8 weeks to get to know each other and put on a play. Everything was condensed. Most years, the show runs early February. We have four full months of time together, learning each other's quirks, and you appreciate your fellow actors because you see where we start and you watch the transition that everyone makes, and everyone has hurdles that they're pushing or crossing. Yeah, is that right?
Jumping. Over.
Yeah, and then you can't help but just be joyful about what people have done.
The use of music in Tintamarre has become more relevant in the past few years, and I think that Alex is actually integrating it into the way that he runs these kinds of workshops. I think it brings a certain sense of rhythm and whatnot. What's been your experience with music in Tintamarre the past few years, this year? How does it affect that kind of space? How does it affect a theatrical space, but also a space of learning and of bilingualism?
The first year I did Tintamarre, it was the singing together as a group that made me come back the first few weeks. So I think it's a really positive part of the experience for me. I'm not as strong a musician as other people, and sometimes that's hard. So for me, the music part is something I really enjoy, but don't feel very confident spearheading. But I think maybe it provides another space. What does it provide? It provides a place for people who don't necessarily feel that confident in the drama aspect of things to lead. So they have a chance to share their gifts, and they really do. Our music is written by students, and it's like magic watching them do it, those of us who aren't so talented in writing music. So I think it provides a space for students who see themselves as musicians to do what they feel confident doing, and that carries over then into a confidence being part of the production as a whole.
Tintamarre's gotten more activist over the years, and I think partly this is Alex, but I think partly it might also be some of the students and stuff like that. If you could speak to that, and also, how does it affect the way that you come into a theater company? You're new, you arrive here, and you're told we're going to do this play about all this stuff that's not going well. And I know that you're not a drama theorist, but what does the absurd bring to that? Because Tintamarre is totally absurdist. It's Beckett on LSD.
Absolutely. Has someone already told you, repeated Alex's story about the camp?
Please tell me.
Okay. So this year's production is about Camp Comme Si Comme Ça, which is a place where children from the city come to embrace nature, as the camp slogan dictates. But there are a lot of qualms about being out in nature and being afraid and preferring to be in the city, and we're really addressing these themes of nature deprivation that people are talking about more and more these days. And Alex just told us a story about an actual summer camp where the counselors had a sit-down meeting with the campers because they were concerned that the children were worshipping a tree. Now we have a scene in the show that could be said by some to depict children worshipping a tree. When these stories happen, and they do happen over and over again, where we think up an idea that is so crazy in our minds, and then we find out it's happening in the real world, you don't forget those stories, and I think they carry over into your life and your actions in a way that textbook readings or desperate news stories just won't. So, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So
the activist part, I have one other thing to say about that.
Of course.
So the first show, I really didn't buy into it, the one that we did.
What was the first show that you did?
Argument.
What was it about?
Maybe I just didn't understand it as well as I have the others. Had a lot to do about the arts and whether or not they should be supported in our communities. That much I can get behind. But also had a family dynamic that I just, about, the chaos of being in a family and being an older sibling or having younger siblings and parents who disapprove of your actions. It felt a bit trite to me. But in the subsequent years, we've talked about food and our relationship with food, which I see as an just vitally important conversation that we should all be having. And now we're talking about this relationship with the outdoors, and I equally so. And I can buy into the message, but I can particularly buy into the show because I know it's going to be brought to schools through the tour at the end of the season, and that our audience is a lot wider than the university community here in Sackville, who come out to support us, which is wonderful. But really, I see it as a spark to get people talking about these issues, and understanding that you don't have to talk about them always in a very serious way, but in fact that there's a network of people out there who are also wrestling with these ideas. So an opening and a sense of not being alone in them. I have a good friend who's a Tintamarrienne, and she talks about growing up in a rural town in Nova Scotia, and she was in high school and she was miserable because there just wasn't a theatre community, and she was desperately shy. And one day she went and she'd slipped out of a class to go to the water fountain and get some time away from her peers. And who does she see walking through the hallways? 5 babies. That is, university students dressed up as adult babies, wearing diapers, carrying bottles. And my friend went, wow. And it was the Tintamarre production come to visit her school, and she never forgot, because there were people older than her who were doing something so foolish, so outside of the confines of high school social norms in her community. And she thought, yeah, okay, there is a place for me out there. There are other people like me. And when she came to Mount Day, she participated every year in Tintamarre and had a wonderful time. Shared it with others by going on tour. Yeah.
That's wonderful. So, because I'm hungry and want to have supper.
Let's go home.
Yeah, one last question though. Is there anything that's kind of come up to your mind just in terms of cogitations about what this entire crazy enterprise is all about, or what it aims to do, or what actually happens?
Sometimes it feels like everyone around you is telling you that you can only make a difference in the world if you have a degree and you find the perfect match of a job, you know exactly what you were meant to do, or you find your calling. And I think Tintamarre is an opportunity to just say, hey, this may not be what I do for the rest of my life. I may not be perfect, but I'm going to give it my all. I'm going to work in this group. I'm going to spend a lot of time waiting while other people practice their lines or rehearse a scene. And then we're going to be totally exhausted together for a week while we run this production. And out of it, I've made friends and shared this message and exercised the creative part of my brain, and it sort of shows that it doesn't have to be your calling to make it a worthwhile thing to do with your time. Does that, so when we leave university, maybe you don't know exactly what it is, but you can approach it with that same dedication. Just enjoy it for what it is in the moment. Yep.
Cool. Thank you very much, Charlotte.